I can call out at least one person who I think is giving out bad advice and bad information. Her name is Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. She goes on and she says something like, men raised by single mothers process emotions like women.
To me, it felt like she was basically taking a dig at single mothers in her own little way.
I think there is a certain amount of emotional regulation and stoicism that men just kind of inherently impart on other men.
You can be a man and masculine and still communicate your feelings effectively without being deemed emotional.
How is it the same people who are complaining about toxic masculinity are also now complaining that men are too feminine? I can call out at least one person who I think is giving out bad advice and bad information. She's known for it. Her name is Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. Bad advice, bad information. For instance, recently, she goes on and she says something like, men raised by single mothers process emotions like women. And she said, then they're in relationships with other women. Now you got two women in a relationship and there's two feminized energies. Now, I'm making a voice because I personally have my feelings about it. But you guys tell me, is she right or is this just reckless generalizing? Is this just her saying something for some clickbait and some attention because she heard a story one time? I mean, does the lack of male presence mean that a man can't learn to be a man at all and he just grows up as a woman? Or is this just a dig at single moms and trying to get them like to bite back at her? Or is she calling out, or is she really calling out a need for a two-parent household? She said it in a larger context. Let me give the context. She said it in the sense of her looking at people she would date and their background. She was saying that what some people may say is a more emotionally in tune man who's been raised by his mom or a female is now a more feminine man because he is voicing those emotions and he is giving voice to that. What do you guys, is she picking a fight where there is none or does she have a point?
Let's not all jump in there at the same time.
Well, I was going to defer to one of the men first, simply because she's talking about men, and I was going to come in. But I don't mind going first. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I'll do the first thing, girl. Let me not defer that thing, girl. Speak your mind.
Go ahead.
She's a woman. Do you agree with her?
So
As a woman who's dated men?
So I would say this, that I can see where she's coming from in the extent of having too much feminine energy in a relationship, because at the end of the day, if you wanted a woman as a woman, then I would have got with a woman. I would have been a lesbian, you know what I'm saying? If I really wanted that type of energy coming into my space with me. But at the same time, I actually took offense to what she was saying as well, because to me, it felt like she was basically taking a dig at single mothers in her own little way. Even though she called herself calling out men, she was actually taking a dig on the parenting style of single mothers. And so I kind of was like, so is she trying to say emotional expression is a form of weakness now? And if that's the case, then why do dudes throw full temper tantrums when a woman says no? Is that part of that then emotionally weak because they was raised by a single parent, a single mother to be precise? Whereas we already know that children who are raised in two-parent homes can have that same emotional state as well. They can be just as emotional. I think that the narrative that men raised by women is weak when we talk about them being too emotional, too feminine, and so forth, especially as we continue to recognize that this gender fluidity, as I like to call it, I think that we actually undermine men and their ability to process emotions when we say, oh, you're too emotional, because at the end of the day, we can't say we want men to express themselves and then get mad when they do, right? It just seems counterintuitive to me to have this type of argument.
Yeah, I think the point that she was, at least the way I received what she was getting at, was I think there is a certain amount of emotional regulation and stoicism that men just kind of inherently impart on other men. And you can't just, just pop off and do exactly what you feel like. Like now we call it crashing out. And a lot of these crash out things we see in the news, I'll listen, I'll watch them or I'll follow the stories. I'm like, you know what if this guy had his dad in his life? And I look at it, I'm like, okay, well, dad wasn't there. I think we minimize the role that fathers or even just males in general play around other males, because the thing that happens when you have males around you, and your father in particular, is if you want to have a lack of emotional regulation, there's always the threat of physical violence that kind of keeps other men in check. So I think that's important, and not to knock on a job that single moms do a wonderful job in most cases that can possibly be done. But there is a certain amount of regulation that happens when other men are present, and that keeps younger guys in check. And we can't talk around it. I think that's important. Again, not to minimize the job that moms are doing, But I think that is an important key. And hopefully that was the point that she was getting at. But those things do happen in both cases, single parent home versus two parent home. It's just a matter of degree. So that's my take.
So, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, I think, in the manosphere conversation. So stay around for that conversation. But it's interesting because you get this type of conversation from women or people in general who have these doctors in front of their names, right? And so when they describe these things, people may be inclined to believe them, hook, line, and sinker, right? Like they're just making the most sense. And what's dangerous about this type of conversation is that there's a lot of truth in what she's saying, right? So statistically, you can bear out that there's certain outcomes of kids, certain outcomes of like what happens in their lives based off of the household structure, right? That doesn't totally account for the nuance when you talk about having two parents, but what complicates it to even be able to say that as eloquently as Delvin did is that there's human beings who feel attacked to say that, right? Like, hey, yes, maybe because you were in this circumstance, it may affect your child, your male child this way, which is why it's probably then even more important for women who are in those situations to find males or men around them or have strong, like a village, as they say, right, to help support. You put them in sports. You try to do the best that you can so that they do have some level of male energy in their lives, because I think most of us would agree that if you can have two people in the home and two energies that are healthy enough to raise a child, that's the best outcome for the most part, right? So I think that's why this conversation is tough, because what she does, though, is that she takes these maybe facts, for example, and then draws this conclusion that's fucking ridiculous on the face of it, right? The idea that a man is going to be emotionally a feminine person in a relationship, right? Because he was raised by a single mother, to me, just draws such a straight line to something that it's impossible to do that. Right? Because there are guys who are raised in homes where the mother, in fact, is stoic, just maybe because she's still dealing with what happened in her relationship with the nigga's father, or because maybe emotionally there's a different things that kids witness growing up in their family's home, regardless of the gender, that does impact them and how they grow up and how they deal with people in relationships. But to Delvin's point, we can't deny, though, that there are some ways that we can maybe point to and try to draw some general conclusions that maybe the reason why this person's responding this way could be that. Right. So I think that's in line. But when you draw that straight line to try to define two people in a relationship and correlate it strictly to the fact that they was raised in a single parent home, I think that's the level of bullshit that we got to push back on a little bit. Because in these discussions is a very fine line in terms of exploratory conversations, us giving our opinions. But like, for example, I don't have a doctor in front of my name. But when somebody like Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, who may be adept at whatever area or field that she's in, but continues to expose herself as somebody who's maybe not adept, or maybe she is in terms of making the money, right? Because maybe it's not really about helping people. It's about sound bites or saying things that will solely get people riled up and then not be able to provide something more than just, look at me because I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? Versus like real solutions. So I think that's the heart of it, but there's a lot of truth in that. We just got to be honest about that. And it happens, you know what I mean? But the question becomes, what do we do to change it? What do we do to impact it or make it better? We can't run from it. I think running from it does us all a disservice. So yeah, I do agree there's some substance there, but at this point, I think she's exposing herself to lack a lot of real substance when you dig a little deeper behind the sound bites that we might hear from her clips.
So, I'm sorry. I just wanted to jump in really quickly and say this. So that was part of the thing that I was leading to, is that I feel that I'm actually disappointed in her because she took something and she made it, because she seemed to come off as pro-female, very feminine in nature and so forth. She seems to be somewhat of a feminist. Not, and I know some days people are like, oh, feminist, that's a bad thing, but it's actually not. And for her to express, like, to make this statement, to me, it seemed like she basically made it seem like femininity itself was the emotion is tied to femininity itself, therefore is negative because it shows up in a male. And so I think that some of the conversation, definitely agreeing with you two, that it should be about the male presence within the home or the male presence within the environment. And let's shed light on the lack of that presence and how that may have also influenced this particular dynamic. Because as you already pointed out, and I also pointed out that even within two-parent homes, we also find this. I think the one question that I have is that why is having two emotionally expressive people in a relationship considered a liability versus being viewed as a strength? That's also something that confused me, especially since she drew that direct line to single motherhood. But Jay, go ahead. I just wanted to add that in.
Okay. Well, since you brought up negatives, and it made me think of math, because I teach sometimes. And I think that what we're looking at here, and we'll talk about more in the manosphere conversation, but what we're looking at here is the fact that you can have an equation and it's not always going to give you a positive or a negative outcome. It depends on the input. So you can have this equation of a single parent, and it doesn't necessarily give you a feminized male. It depends on the input of the mother you have and the conditions that the child is raised in, and how much attention is given and how much time is given, and then what other factors and forces there are around. So I agree with everybody who said this was an overgeneralization that should not have been made by any person of reasonable intelligence. You can draw your own conclusions there. That being said, what does she even mean when she says processing emotions like a woman, as though it's a bad thing, as though it's shade? Do you mean like to feel deeply? You mean like to examine all of your emotions to see if they're valid? You mean to go through everything that you feel to figure out which one of those things you really feel? You mean to cry instead of to collapse? Do you mean, if we're talking being feminized in terms of that, then maybe men should do more of that. Maybe not all of that, but let's be honest, let's cut the men some breaks, y'all. Women get their whole lives to figure out what their feelings mean and how to deal with them. But men are supposed to have it figured out by the time we say, I'm a man. We're not allowed to be able to feel all the things we're feeling in one moment. We got to pick one thing and be that one thing in this moment because everybody needs us to be something. So the landscape is different. The hands are not the same. I don't even know we play in the same game sometimes because emotionally stunted masculinity is killing us. How is it the same people who are complaining about toxic masculinity are also now complaining that men are too feminine? It's weird. This is literally and spiritually, we are going left and right at the same time. Let's be honest. Yes, a lack of consistent male presence does shape how men interact with not only other men, but women, right? And men are learning. They're learning about women from their mother. They're learning about emotions from their mom. They're learning how they're going to process themselves at the same time. There are a lot of moving parts happening right then. A lot of them. And so, yeah, I can expect a young man might be disoriented, but to automatically assume that this young man will somehow be emotionally lost is careless. And it's belittling and demeaning to all the people who have done this journey successfully. And they didn't make any fuss about it. They didn't ask for any plaques. They didn't go on your podcast. They didn't call you Dr. Bryant because they're not listening to you. They're too busy on their hustle. So let's flip the script. I do think it's a dig at single mothers. I don't think it's a plea for male accountability at all. Because if we really want balance, then we talk about the men who checked out. We talk about the absence of the fathers and why. And then we'd say, if these women aren't properly able to raise the man, why are they holding on to the boys? That'd be the conversation we'd be having. If we were really trying to have a community-driven conversation. And when she's ready to have that conversation, maybe then I'll tune into what she's got to say.
Boom,
Hold on, I got to push back. I got to push back on something. I got to push back on something because Jay, so this, y'all, so, I did the whole, thing on the previous part of the conversation, so feel free to tap in there. So let me turn the hat around a little bit. First of all, Jay, I'm going to call cap on a couple of things. Number one, this idea that women react emotionally in a healthy, productive way. Let's start there. Because you were describing that, how women deal, you mean like by communicating? You mean by regulating? No, what y'all missed, it didn't hit me until you said what you said. What y'all missed was Dr. Cheyenne Bryant was telling on herself and women as a whole. You know what I mean? Because what she was saying is, yes, to emote like a woman is a problem, or at least when both people are doing it. Now, if she makes the sliver of, hey, we need a balance, okay, I could buy that a little bit, but too much estrogen is a problem. We know this is true because we hear about our wives' relationships with other women. We know this is true just off of GP. So how are we going to pretend that she's not telling on y'all, right? Because what she's saying is that if men left to the devices of only women, that the only thing that's going to be that they're going to soak up for them is some emotional, uncontrollable shit that's not going to show up well with another woman in a relationship, right? She wouldn't say that about a father, right? She wouldn't say that, oh, the daughter is going to pick up too many manly traits and she might become a butch nigga. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? So Dr. Cheyenne Bryant just inadvertently told, right? And she did. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm pushing back, Jay, because, and let's also be honest, as men who, I think what the problem is, and I think you kind of drew a falsehood here. You can be a man and masculine and still communicate your feelings effectively without being deemed emotional. There's ways that you can communicate the things that you're dealing with without losing your temper necessarily, without yelling at a high-pitched voice or throwing tantrums, right? That type of lack of emotional regulation are the things that have been hallmarked by women, right? Because for men, you made the case that men can't even communicate. So we're not supposed to even do that in the healthiest form. At least that's how we've been taught, right? So the ways that we as men are expected to show up is not to emote at all. And I'm saying bullshit, right? Because there's a way for you to still have emotions and to communicate your emotions effectively to another human being with the desire of solving a problem. In fact, when people talk about what men are supposed to be and how men are supposed to show up, aren't those the attributes that we want from men, right? So I got to push back on this idea that being emotional, it means that you have to emote erratically, like unfortunately women are known to do, or how they excuse that they do it because of their period and shit. Like, what the fuck you mean? There's a whole, listen, man,
I'm
these are
calling bullshit.
There are, you're going to have a chance to rebut, but there are cultural things that we've already talked about in the relationship space. This is not Nick making it up, right? This is stuff that we talk about in terms of how men bring logic to the situation, and women sometimes are the more emotional ones. They have all these different reasons, like their bodies, like their hormones, whether it's pregnancy, postpartum, or what menopause, these different things. What do you call it? The word that escapes me, right? Things in their bodies that change. So this is not Nick making it up, that is fused through science. So what I'm saying is, if the idea that a young boy is only being exposed to that type of energy and that could be problematic, right, then she's not that far off. The problem becomes, to Jay's point, and what we all said is that which women are you talking about? And if we were to sit there and try to isolate it for what percentage of women do you think are healthy enough to raise a young boy with the mindset to make sure he has a man's presence around them, then that's a different conversation. Maybe that's the conversation too. And Jay, last thing I'm gonna say, since we want to get to this full cock gender war with it, right? Yes, the nigga is missing, but it's her body, her choice. The fuck are we talking about, fam? When people are adults and they have to make decisions, I'm not saying a woman should do anything except the responsibility of the choices that she also made. Yes, the nigga sucks, but that doesn't mean a woman still can't have masculine and male presence in that child's life. It might be an extra thing that she has to be intentional about. Are women going to churches? Are they going to events in their communities? Are they actively participating out there with others where their child can get that kind of exposure? Right? There's things that people can do, and some women aren't doing those things. So we got to be honest about that too. So go ahead, Esther, if you want to shoot back. You feel me? Let's go.
So first I'll allow Jay to do it, since Jay, you was pushing back on Jay commentary first.
So his pushback on my comment wasn't whatever. His pushback was that I didn't fully call women out and say that her statement saying that two people in a relationship acting like a woman is a problem, it would suggest that women are problematic by themselves. Now, my answer to that is, of course, having only one kind of energy is problematic. You see, usually in lesbian couples, or usually in homosexual couples, let me say that, you will see one person representing as more feminine and the other representing with more masculine energy, even though they may be homosexual, right? It's just there's that interplay, that balance. Two people can't both move necessarily the exact same way, because then they might not complement each other. If you take two crabs, right, they both step sideways, nobody's ever going to go forward until somebody shifts, because of the way that they move. So my pushback to Nick is, I'm trying to give people some bail and some grace today. I already messed up with the older ladies, man, and I feel like there's some women who are strong, and I feel like, honestly, I feel like the men who were raised by single moms who did not have a choice in it, they just end up being single moms. Like I was raised by a single mom. I feel like they catching a stray right now from Dr. Bryant, and I don't appreciate it. So I just want to talk to them real quick, and then y'all can go on to y'all conversation. I want to tell them, y'all not broken, okay? You're not less than, all right? You just learn from survival. You learn how to blend. You learn a different side of women, right? You just learned from you came to school a different way, right? You was in the other class. And that's okay, all right? You learned about your feelings, and you want to express your feelings. That's okay too, man. You just got to find somebody who cares about hearing about your feelings. And you got to know when you can't be in your feelings, because that's part of being a man. And if you haven't learned that, then your mama did you a disservice. And then holler back, because we're going to have to get back and talk about like what it is to be raised in a man on a manosphere conversation. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
So I just want to say this really quickly then, to why I said bullshit. So first of all, we act like men, just because y'all only express anger and violence, that's not an emotion. because just
I said
because
that.
you guys no this I'm just saying that you guys say that you're stoic and you're this and you're that, but if you're so stoic and so this, then why the hell we got so many wars started? Or matter of fact, why we had folks back in the day, soon as somebody step on your tennis shoes, next thing you know, you're trying to kill the person because they stepped on your tennis shoes. Or if a woman reject a man, all of a sudden he trying to fight her, trying to slap her, trying to do harm to her. So
Why we got
this
women fighting
whole
on World Star?
and so what I'm saying is that men cannot claim that they're not emotional. I'm tired of that fucking narrative that men aren't emotional, period. Men have been emotional their entire life. The problem is we have this whole called propaganda that was set out in the 1950s where they started pushing this whole masculinity thing, which was, oh, men are supposed to be stoics, men are supposed to be this, men are supposed to be that. When in reality, the only time you guys were that way was because it was, how can I put it nicely? It was because you're trying. It was, oh, here it is. It's because you didn't know how to process, and not you guys, but men didn't know how to process their emotions in the manner that they should have been processing their emotions. At the end of the day, men are emotional. When you react with violence, when you react with anger, when you react certain ways, that is still emotion. Now, women may be more expressive when they do certain things, like how I'm expressing my emotion. Like, matter of fact, even when, what's the guy who became the judge and he was crying and everything, and it was like, women are more emotional. But this man sitting there from a 2-parent home and a trust fund, and he was up there crying. But no one said, oh, he was being emotional. They're like, oh, he was passionate, because you guys frame it a certain way to make sure it benefits you. So I'm going to say this. Everybody has emotions. The way, my problem with this, and why I understand when I started off saying, yeah, I don't want to be two women relationship, right? Because that was me saying that there are certain characteristics that I do expect men to show up with and have, right? Because that's how we've been socialized, is that men are supposed to be stoic. Men are supposed to be logical. Men are supposed to be this. But women have the same capability to be all those things as well, and are all those things. So I'm just saying that she was dead ass wrong for placing on single women or single mothers. And I also want to push back on the fact that you talking about, oh, they should have chose. Well, shit, how you know she didn't choose the person that was the representative that showed up? Y'all act like men ain't out here fronting. That ain't their representative that's showing up. And they're like, they say all the good things and and then they get the draw, spray up in the club. And now all of a sudden, oh, you should have chose. It's your body, your choice. But then we'll still have those same men come back and say, Black women are murdering our babies.
What the fuck, S&M? I get it. You didn't have much room to go with, so you had to grab at straws towards an argument that nobody was making, right? Nobody said that men don't have emotions, right? In fact, I think I was pointing out those things as exactly that, emotions. And what we're talking about is when men are not able to regulate themselves. You mentioned guys shoes being stepped on. I'd be willing to bet, because I think if you looked at the statistics, the number of brothers in that period of time who were doing those things probably did grow up in a single parent home. Hate to break it to you. You know what I'm saying?
Because the
A
father
la
was
Boys in the Hood.
absent.
But the results of that, it was that they were still raised in single parent homes. So I wasn't disagreeing.
A
I'm
fatherless
saying that,
home.
yes, men are. I'm sorry, say it again.
Oh, I said a fatherless home. I'm going to start reframing it. Every time we talk about single mothers,
I don't
I'm going to say
care.
fatherless home.
I don't
I'm
see.
just adding. It's
No, I
propaganda
get it,
too.
right? Thank you for playing it out right here, right? Because for me, it is performative, right? I enjoy having these conversations because honestly, I don't give a fuck about some of this stuff to a certain extent, right? I don't. This is because I think there's a certain level of detachment that we need to have. Maybe that's me being stoic. But my point that I was making was that in terms of, yes, I was pushing back on Jay because Jay was trying to position it as if these qualities that women express are the things that she was talking about. No, she was not talking about those qualities. Y'all act like that she's not being specific in regards to certain behaviors when it comes to lack of problem solving skills, especially in relationships, right? Or the emotional irregulation that some of these people go through. And yes, it may not be just men who are in single parent homes, but again, if you look at the statistics, there's numbers to bear that out. So she's not making this shit up out of whole fucking cloth. So when y'all have to go to these fucking extremes to make it seem as if there isn't some truth to what she's saying, and I'm only echoing the fact that when Jay was saying, oh, these are the characteristics of women, that made it seem like if you're a man and you exhibit these characteristics, what is she talking about? Maybe men should be more like women. In that case, that's bullshit. The way that we talk about women and their lack of emotional irregularity and a lack of logic and the ability to use logic at times, a lack of accountability, you can go down the fucking litany of things when we talk about the central points that maybe women should work on. Room for improvement. Can I say it that way? Does that land a little bit better? In one of those areas, it would be some of y'all's irrational emotionality. So yes, if that behavior is being shown to a young man and he is looking at that partially at times, because when does that type of emotion show up? When there's conflict, right? Think about it. When most people act a fool is when? conflict. So you get to see how they resolve conflict. And every time they're resolving conflict, they're yelling, they're screaming, or behaving wildly, or cursing somebody out, or being the victim, right? Or having a certain mindset. That type of shit can be seen in front of a child who is impressionable from both a male and a female standpoint. Right. So if we were talking about how young women are out there raised to be hoes because they didn't have a father, yeah, let's stick to that too. But today we're talking about whether or not men who are raised in these type of households may show up a certain type of way in relationships. Right. So let's just be honest about that. And I feel like when we run from the fact, and that's the name, if you're going to deny that, and I even built in, the thing that gets me is I even acknowledge the built in parts that maybe emotional irregularity shows up because of just, science. Right. So, and so when y'all use that to y'all advantage, it's okay. But for me to point it out as a reason why sometimes y'all emotions tend to be a little bit difficult to regulate. Come on, man. Stop playing. And and this is the other thing that Jay said, that bullshit ass example about two people in a homosexual relationship. They're both women, fam. so just because one purports that do you know people in relationships, right? Because if you talk to them, you know what I'm saying? That bullshit of that presentation goes the fuck away when they're arguing. You know what I'm saying? You would hope that one person might come across a certain type of way. But yo, dog, they be bitching too. The fuck are we talking about? Fuck, they're human beings, fam, but they're women first, okay, in the context of which we're talking about. And you mentioned that there's a reason why out of all the different relationship types, whether it's man-man, whether it's woman-man, whether it's woman-woman, as far as the most violent, the most eruptive is guess who? Okay, that's just by coincidence, right? Okay, go ahead, man. And mind you, I'm not trying to pull the point that women who are emotional get into relationships and that leads them to be hoes and like Dr. Bryant did. I'm just making the point, like I said before, yes, we can have these generality conversations, right? Because I think that's where it makes sense. But once we start to drill down, it's like, all right, come on, sis. You adding up shit that don't really fucking add up. Okay, that's all I'm basically saying. And to that, y'all say what? Come on.
I say you got the next topic area, sir.
No, I want to give y'all some room to breathe. They say I talk too much, and I'll give y'all a chance to chum on. Chum on then. Chum on.